Okay, good evening everyone and welcome to the meeting of the Cabinet. I'm Councillor Perama and I'm chairing the meeting tonight. So for the public record, we have all Cabinet members present and as well as a number of officers, and we have I do have a note if there are any attendees and speakers, but if virtual attendees wish to speak, they should indicate with the yellow hand icon and I'll pick this up in the meeting. So this meeting is being streamed live and recorded by the Council for subsequent broadcast via the Council's internet site. So before we start, if I can just go around and ask the Cabinet members to introduce themselves and state their portfolio areas, and this is of course for the benefit of viewers watching. So if I start to my left, so starting with you, Dana.
Councillor Dana Carlin, Cabinet Member for Housing, Private Renters and Planning.
Zina Brabazon, Cabinet Member for Children, Schools and Families.
Councillor Lucia Das-Neves, Cabinet Member for Health, Social Care and Wellbeing.
Adam Jogi, Economic Development, Jobs and Community Cohesion.
Councillor Chantwani, Cabinet Member for Tackling Inequality and Resident Services.
Julie Davis, Cabinet Member for Communities and Civic Life. Councillor Sarah Williams, Cabinet Member for Finance and Local Investment.
Councillor Ruth Gordon, Cabinet Member for Council Housebuilding, Placemaking and Development.
Michael Carter, Deputy Leader and Member for Climate Action, Environment and Transport.
Thank you. Any apologies?
Chair, we have no apologies.
No apologies. Urgent business.
Mr. Chair, we do not have any new items of urgent business, but there is an additional addendum to be considered with item 9, North London Waste Plan. These are the minutes of the Strategic Planning Committee, which considered this report after publication of the Cabinet agenda on the 14th of June. And as set out in the late business sheet, we'll need to consider this information in accordance with Part 3, Section B of the Council Constitution. These minutes have been circulated and they're referred to in the recommendation. So
Okay.
Just ask if the Cabinet is happy to accept those minutes.
Okay. Are we happy to agree this additional information? Agreed. Any declarations of interest? Item 5, which is the notice of intention to conduct business in private. This agenda does contain exempt items as set out at item 14. There were no representations received at the agenda publication stage in relation to the exempt items on the agenda. So if we can turn to the minutes, which is item 6, pages 1 to 44, can we just agree the minutes? Item 7, matters referred to the Cabinet by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I don't believe any have been received. Item 8, which is deputations, petitions and questions. So I have received and accepted a deputation from the Pinkham Way Alliance in relation to item 9, the North London Waste Plan. Stephen Bryce is the spokesperson and I believe he's joining us online. Yeah. So Stephen, can you put your camera and your microphone on? You're just sat, and when you're ready, you have 3 minutes to make your representations.
Am I there?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. And it's 3 minutes or 5? 3?
3.
3, fine. I'm Stephen Bryce. I'm chair of the Pinkham Way Alliance. When we first saw the inspector's report for the waste plan and his decision to retain the Pinkham Way site in the plan, we were disappointed. As most of you will know, PWA has long argued that as a site wholly reclaimed by nature, designated by Haringey as a Grade 1 sink and identified in a green space in council maps, Pinkham Way was wholly unsuitable for inclusion in a waste plan. However, on reading the inspector's detailed main modification 113 concerning the site, we realised that his decision to set out in black and white most of the Alliance's planning arguments about the site's status and the multitude of planning constraints surrounding it had substantially clarified an issue which had been trapped for a decade in opacity and in equivocation, and thank heavens for that. We accept the inspector's findings. We welcome his insistence that consultation with the local community will be required for any proposed waste facility on this site, and we hope for any proposal. And we also welcome the level of detail in the Cabinet report before you, which now gives Haringey members a comprehensive picture of the issues. Counterintuitively then, and the Council agrees, the site's now safer in the waste plan than out of it. Importantly for developers, for the Waste Authority and for planners in all member councils, the adopted NLWP becomes part of every local plan, and the multi-layered difficulties surrounding any development proposal will be plain to all. Of course, the inspector's remit didn't cover every aspect of the site. That will have to wait until the local plan consultations. And our discussions with planners and members, we're now in regular contact with the council again, tell us that there is proper cooperation between officers involved in preparing policies covering the climate crisis, planning, green space and biodiversity. And that's wholly to be welcomed, and we hope the policies will be as robust as the present background demands. The authority has stated publicly that it has no short or medium terms for the medium-term plans for the site. The true depth of its vagueness about its ideas only became apparent at the waste plan hearings. Its justification in support of the inclusion of a site that it's always claimed to be essential to its strategy was this: we may want a site in the west of our area by the end of the plan period for something to do with the circular economy. What a reflection on strategic ineptitude and financial waste. An authority serving a quarter of London, which in 2011 trumpeted Pinkham Way as integral to Europe's biggest ever waste procurement, the Waste Authority's flagship project. This was 18 months before it found the purchase was unnecessary, and around 2 years before the vaunted flagship turned turtle and re-emerged as the Marie Celeste. After all these years, you might reasonably ask what local enthusiasm remains for Pinkham Way. We started in 2011. Well, in 2019, 8 years in, our Regulation 19 waste plan submission attracted 40% more supporting signatures than any previous PWA response. In 2014, we submitted a site management plan and asked local residents for in-principle indications of practical support, and about 130 came forward. So be sure that there's still abiding interest in the site. Hardly a surprise, since for almost 50 years after the sewage works closed, the site was the open space for local residents and assessed as such by the council's advisors. Now, I've no more to say, except that we're pleased to be more or less on the same page as Haringey, and that past acrimony is, cross fingers, done with. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you very much. If it's okay with you, some of the Cabinet may have some questions, so I'm just going to turn to Cabinet colleagues. Councillor Jogi.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Stephen, for your presentation. Like others, I've long observed your campaigning work, and I'm pleased that we're all now on the same page. Just a point around consultation with the community to issue referred a minute ago.
Yeah.
What do you think effective consultation will look like, and how do you see that working from your side, just so we make sure that we all remain on, as you put it, the same page? Well, I would imagine that at any sort of pre-application stage, the community would be brought in and asked for sort of informal informal reactions. I get the feeling talking to the planners that the council's got no wish to sort of blindside residents. Are you, if you're saying if the community is against it, would they be disappointed if the thing went ahead? Well, I think you'd have to wait for the circumstances in the proposal. I think the likelihood of there being a proposal, given, I don't know if you've read
main modification 113, which is it's 10 pages in his main modifications appendix. That as far as we're concerned, we think that any developer considering the site and coming across the constraints and conditions would pretty quickly go and try and find somewhere else. We've always thought that the site is effectively undeliverable, and even though it is included in the waste plan, it's only as a site suitable for search. It's not designated. Having not been involved in a specific instance of sort of consultation about a particular proposal, I think we just have to assess it as we went along. It's not a very sort of useful answer, perhaps, but we haven't got our ideas set out in black and white.
Thank you, Stephen. Any more questions? Councillor Nakata?
Probably not a question, it's more a comment, really. Just obviously, thank you for your presentation tonight, Stephen, and thank you for taking the time to give me a tour of the site a few months ago. So, we discussed some of those issues and the fact that actually that the site is probably safer in the plan than out of the plan, and that was something that we had discussed back then. All I would say is that I think it is a site that essentially the challenges of developing it are so great that in reality it's not something that I think is likely to be controversial for very much time further. So I think, it's just thanks for the work that you've done, which has been quite detailed, and thank you for coming to terms and an agreement with council officers as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Are you there, Stephen? You seem to have frozen. No, I think we've lost it. Was there any more questions? No. Let's see if we can get him back, and because Dana, you've got the opportunity to respond. Okay, so for anyone online, just say we seem to have lost connection with Stephen. So there are no more questions anyway, but I'm going to hand over to the Cabinet Member, Councillor Carlin, who can provide a response to the deputation.
Thank you. We have lost the Pinkham Way allowance, but I'd like to just comment on the deputation. Stephen, we have you back. I would like to thank you very much for your deputation this evening, and also, as others have said, for the work that the Pinkham Way Alliance has done for well over 10 years. This has made a substantial difference to the site and to the scheme going forward, and has actually led us to the position that we are in today, which is a plan which we find acceptable, which you find acceptable, and which respects the site, the biodiversity of the site, going forward. So thank you very much for your deputation and for the work that you've done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your deputation, and you are welcome, of course, to stay online as we move on to consider the North London Waste Plan as an item.
Well,
So if we
spectacular disappearance. I think I'll probably take that as a warning and go. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So if we can move to item 9, which is the North London Waste Plan. So over to you again, Dana, to introduce the report.
Thank you. As many will know, this plan has had a very long genesis and considerable community engagement. It has been substantially modified from the original, specifically or most recently following the inspector's report in 2021. Haringey has agreed to include 3 sites into the plan: Brantford Road and North East Tottenham in North East Tottenham, and Pinkham Way, or the Free and Barnet sewage site in Browns Green. What must be noted is that our authority does not own these sites. Brantford Road and North East Tottenham are allocated as strategic industrial location employment land, and there are industrial sites with a number of different owners. Pinkham Way is designated as employment land and a site of importance for nature conservation. One section of the site is owned by the North London Waste Authority, and the rest of the site is owned by Barnet Council. I would like to draw Cabinet's attention to paragraph 5.26 of the report, which contains a factual error. It is stated that the Pinkham Way site in the plan was put forward by both the North London Waste Authority and Barnet Council as a site suitable for waste management. I can advise that at no point has Barnet put the site forward as being suitable for waste use. This is reflected in Appendix C of the Cabinet Report, North London Waste Plan Appendix 2 Area Profiles, which states that only a proportion of the overall area will be suitable for development, given the land is in 2 ownerships and Barnet has no current plans to develop a waste facility. This is likely to impact on the deliverability of the site in its entirety. A smaller part of the site in the NLWA single ownership part of the site is therefore most likely to accommodate any development. I would like to thank the Pinkham Way Alliance and Stephen for actually pointing out this error in our papers, which was very useful. The North London Waste Plan was last agreed by Cabinet in 2019, and the amendments I would like to bring to your attention are regarding the Pinkham Way site, where the inspector stated that the plan should more clearly demarcate where the development can actually take place, and that map is in the papers. And you will also note the revised agenda map. This inspector also stated that there should be increased biodiversity on the site, and there are plans to do that. So I propose the Cabinet agrees the recommendations in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carlin. Questions? Councillor Catter.
2 quick questions. One is there's obviously a lot of focus. There has been a lot of focus on Pinkham Way and very little focus on Brantwood Road. I think it would be good to have some reassurance that Brantwood Road, which is actually in the heart of a residential area, any facility, and I know it's highlighted for recycling and waste transfer, that any facility there would not negatively impact local residents, for instance, with odour and that kind of thing. And then the second question, which you might not be able to answer, I don't know, but is that with Pinkham Way, as I explained earlier, I went on a tour of it and walked around it and thought at the time that this would actually make a perfect location for a wind farm or a solar farm, and obviously it's down here in the planning as for waste, but just wondering whether it's possible that we could potentially extend its use and have something else there, such as sustainable energy.
I will answer the first question and then I will hand over to Rob to answer the second. In terms of the Brantford Road site, I'm aware that it borders on the west of that site with the residential area. At present, that road is actually restricted. So that means that large trucks can't actually drive from the west, from the high road side towards Brantford Road site, because the road is actually narrowed. That would mean that any vehicles that wish to come down for waste transfer would actually have to come from the east of the borough and almost directly off the North Circular. So that's a reassurance that we're not going to have lorries rumbling through our streets taking anything for waste transfer to the site, which is of concern. As it states in the papers, it's a very large site, and whatever's going to be put there is unlikely to take up the whole site. So any recommendations that would come forward and what we would recommend is that nothing is placed anywhere near to the residential areas. Although we can't change the Pinkham Way, the North London Waste plan, we can actually in the local plan make sure we put some of those safeguards in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And on the second question, and I'm Rob Shastovsky, the Assistant Director for Planning, Building Standards and Sustainability. The question from Councillor Carter about could this site be suitable for a wind farm or solar farm at some point in the future? The plan does not preclude that from happening, so it's possible to happen in the future. It would obviously have to be subject to pre-application engagement with the community, a planning application, and would be subject to all of the normal planning policies that exist in our local plan as well. So whilst the wind farm or solar farm proposal is not proposed in this plan, it does not preclude that from happening in the future.
Thank you, Rob. Any more questions from Cabinet? Councillor Dasness.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to be really clear reading through and that I've understood correctly what's in the papers. And we've got a couple of sites there in Tottenham. And am I correct in my understanding that each site might well come through in that customary planning process as you've described, Rob, but actually we might look and there's no guarantee that we'll use both of them, and then actually on balance we might well look at one and think it's more suitable and another not, or vice versa, or indeed neither. Have I read the papers correctly?
Sorry, if I could just hand over to Rob to answer that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So yes, would all still be subject to planning applications in the future, which would need to meet all of the relevant planning requirements, and it could well be concluded that they are not appropriate in terms of a detailed proposal at some point in the future. This establishes the principle of waste use, but there's still lots of details still to be confirmed. And as with any other planning policy document, this would be subject to ongoing monitoring. So actually, if one of the sites gets developed for a waste use that might help meet a significant amount of capacity, it might be the view might be taken that no more sites are needed or smaller sites are needed, rather than sort of using up a whole site for a particular intense use. So it would be monitored and looked at as any applications come forward in the future.
Councillor Chamwani.
Thank you, Lisa. I just wanted to know if we can note it that if any of the Tottenham sites do become an option for the future, obviously we don't know at the moment, but for the future, that we don't just have a standard planning application, because not everyone has the tenacity nor the intelligence of Stephen. I mean, his knowledge on Pinkham Way is unbelievable. It's PhD level, but we need to make sure that when we communicate with people in Tottenham, if we were going to use that site, that we don't rely on tenacity and a higher level of knowledge that actually is accessible to every resident. I know when the Pinkham Way stuff was happening, some of it was going over my head because of the fact that it was so technical, both the planning process and the waste process. So if we are going to do something, then the engagement around the planning would be really important to embed.
I think that's certainly what we would be planning to do. and there would need to be considerable community engagement prior to any plan going forward. In addition, as I've noted previously, these sites the land ownership on these sites very complicated, and any kind of land assembly is going to be fairly difficult on the sites. Thank you.
Any more questions from the Cabinet? No. So I'm going to turn to the screen, and I've got Councillor Gosling.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have 2 questions, if I may, please. Can they hear me? Sorry, can you hear me?
Sorry, we can, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Sorry about that. In all the documentations, it is mentioned that the contribution of the Pinkham Way site is 5.95 hectares. Yet in the main report, it is mentioned that there have been modification to make clear, and I quote, that only a proportion of the overall site area will be used for development, and to make explicit that the smaller part of the site in the North London Waste Authority's ownership is most likely to accommodate any development. Why then does the plan continue to list the whole site as a priority area instead of removing completely the areas which are less suitable? And my second question is about the strategy. So this strategy, the overall strategy, relies heavily on the building of the Edmonton incinerator. In light of Michael Gove's comments that the government will be scrutinising that plan, how will you respond if the incinerator rebuild is not allowed to proceed? Thank you.
Sorry, I'll take that. I'll take the second question, and I'll ask Rob to come back on clearly on the first question. This is the North London Waste Plan, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the incinerator and the incinerator going forward. So if the incinerator goes ahead or doesn't go ahead, it doesn't actually affect this plan. This is not about the incinerator. It has nothing to do with that. This is a plan regarding planning sites for waste in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And on the first question about the plan talks about 5.95 hectares for Pinkham Way, but elsewhere in the reports it talks about a sort of a more tightly defined developable area. It's worth saying actually that the Pinkham Way area is actually an area of search rather than being described as a particular site. So it is very much that. It doesn't mean that there's a red line boundary that will be filled by a development. It is clear that it's an area of search. We could have redrawn it to a smaller boundary, but actually that is ultimately for a proposal to come forward to precisely define a developable area, and so we don't think it's appropriate to preempt that and preempt what the best design of the site would be. However, we have set out in the Cabinet report the very clear constraints that any proposal would need to fit within, to do with flooding, biodiversity, land ownership, proximity to residential areas, etc. So we think that's an appropriate balance. So 5.95 hectares does not mean that all of that site is developed as a site or as a building. In reality, that area of search, if a proposal comes forward, will be developed on a much smaller area. Thank you.
Is that all your questions, Councillor Gosling? Yeah, I presume so. Okay,
Yeah,
I can't see anyone else on the screen. No. Okay, so that's all the questions. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 47. Are we all agreed? Agreed, thank you. So moving on to item 10, which is the decision to begin the rehousing of Stapleford North. Councillor Gordon, can I ask you to introduce the report, please?
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the paper that's before you now, that's very loud, I'll just move it away, is really the sort of next steps in the development of the Broadwater Farm Improvement Plan, which we are hoping and believe will be ending in a complete transformation of Broadwater Farm. And so this is just one of the next steps, as I say, and just as a reminder of what the plans for Broadwater Farm entail. It includes the building of 294 homes, which would be 100% affordable, and by affordable we mean at council rents for those council homes. Some of those are replacement homes for the homes that will be demolished, but there will be a net gain of council homes, and indeed a huge increase in the number of family homes on the estate. So there's sort of massive improvements. It also include plans for a new medical centre, a grocery shop on the site, and more enterprise units, and huge public realm improvements as well. We've been working with residents now for at least 18 months and working very closely with residents. And, you know, it's been a sort of iterative process where the plans have changed according to what the feedback has been from those residents. And that's the way that it should work. And that's the way that we are determined that it will be working into the future, that process doesn't finish. You know, it keeps going on, where plans can be changed and tweaked as we go along. And I think the confirmation of that close relationship that we've built up over those 18 months accumulated in the ballot that took place that supported the scheme, which resulted in a 55% turnout in the ballot, with an 85% support for the proposals. So I think we can feel reasonably assured that we've had affirmation from the residents that they want the scheme to go ahead. So this is one of the next steps, which involves a sort of, you know, feels like a sort of small step in a way compared with the whole scheme. But this step is about specifically the demolition of part of Stapleford, which is just the sort of wing part of Stapleford, which is attached to the Northolt Tower, which is due for demolition. We had a consultation with residents, and again, the residents were preferring the option of demolition, and they will be recanted. So this paper is to account for the demolition of that wing of Stapleford, known as Stapleford North, which we've got a budget figure in there, as you can see from the papers, of 600k. I will emphasise, though, that the demolition of the Northolt Tower, there will be a separate paper because of those costs, but the two will be done in conjunction, so that we're not just demolishing one part without thinking about the other. So all of the construction management plans, we are working together with the residents to make sure that there's as least disruption as possible, but obviously recognising that there will be some disruption. We're also asking in this paper to authorise the rehousing of those residents in the block, and also we're asking for approval of the acquisition of the leasehold interests that are in the block, and for a sum of money in order to cover the cost of rehousing the secure tenants. That has been built into the budget, so that figure is for noting. So those are the sort of four main asks. I'll leave it there for any questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gordon. Questions? Okay, I'll turn to the screen. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Goslin.
Thank you again. I have one question, please. So 55% turnout is very low considering people are voting for the demolition of their homes, and the estate ballots in other authorities have typically seen higher turnouts. So this essentially means that fewer than half the residents on the estate positively voted in favour of regeneration. My question is, why do you think the turnout was so low, and what will you do in the future estate ballots to ensure this figure is higher? Thank you.
I don't think the 55% is that low, considering that most people that were eligible to vote in this ballot will not be affected at all by the scheme. So I think to get this consensus that we did get was, as I said in my introductory remarks, an affirmation that people want this scheme to go ahead. And I think that the issue is really that we have, I mean, there's always lessons to be learned when you go on to a massive consultation exercise like this. And it's more than consultation, it's working directly with the residents. But I think we've, learned lessons as we've gone along. But I have to say, I would sort of like to take this opportunity really of paying tribute to the staff that worked on this campaign, because we put all the material that was put out in several community languages. The blocks were posted and leafleted in all different languages, and I think actually that the way in which we went about this campaign, there was posters along the roads, there was posters in the blocks, there was numerous meetings, there were pop-up events, there was endless sort of discussions with models of the scheme out, and residents came out, officers were talking to residents. We had a huge engagement about what the landlord offer meant, with translators on the scheme. So I think actually that we did a pretty good job, and I again pay testament to the officers that organised that. I thought they were very good. There are always lessons to be learned, of course, both good lessons and bad lessons, if you like, and we are picking up on those issues. But we feel that we have got an affirmation from the residents that this will be a good scheme, and it is supported by local residents.
Thank you very much. Gordon, did you have any more questions?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we will consider the recommendations for this item after the exempt information at item 15. So if we could move to item... Oh, sorry, best till last. Go ahead, Councillor Chanwani.
Just for the record, there's two councillors in here who represent Broadwater Farm in our ward, and we haven't felt that they haven't accepted this verdict. It reflects on how they feel. So there isn't a whole load of people saying that doesn't reflect my feelings and I don't want this to continue. I think the second point I want to make is who the electorate was, and if I'm correct, the electorate also included people that had already been decanted and moved and therefore didn't feel a vested interest, where in previous ballots in other parts of the country, the electorate is living on the actual estate and therefore they're talking about their current home, where here those from Tangemere and from Norfolk had already been decanted and are happy where they are and don't see that as their home, and haven't done for several years. So I think in the terms of the 55%, that needs to be taken into context.
Thank you, Councillor Chanwani. I think some very good points made by both yourself and Councillor Gordon, really, and I'd just like to second what you said in terms of paying tribute to the team and all the efforts that went into that consultation for the ballot. So I've already said it, but I'll just say it again, we will consider this the recommendations after exempt information at item 15. So if we can move on to item 11, which is the establishment of the corporate parenting committee, the appointment of cabinet members to committees and partnerships, and confirmation of terms of reference. Is that Aisha and Fiona? Is that over to you? Yeah.
Yeah, this is an annual report and it takes forward the re-establishment of the Corporate Parenting Advisory Committee, and its terms of reference are set out, the appendix for approval, and it also sets out the members that will be serving on the advisory subcommittee. There's also an update of the LHC appointments, and this is a joint committee which is actually continuing till March 2023, following the agreement by constituent boroughs in February 2022 to disband. And
this puts forward Councillor Williams and Councillor Bevan to continue until that time, and it also takes forward the and confirms the appointment of Councillor Bevan, who is an existing member of the LHC board, who has been nominated to sit on a holding board as a delegated representative from the joint committee, and as he's a member here at Haringey Council, we need to just confirm that. And then the report is just confirming the terms of reference for the Community Safety Partnership and appointing members to this statutory partnership body.
Thank you, Aisha. Did you have anything to add, Fiona? Okay. Is there any questions on that? No. Okay. So if we can move to the resolution, which is to approve the recommendations as set out at page 5 to 8. Are we all agreed? Okay. Item 12, minutes of other bodies. Can Cabinet please note those? Item 13, new items of urgent business. There is none. So if we move to 14, which is the exclusion of the press and public, so now we'll consider items 15 to 16, which contain exempt information in relation to item 10 and 6. So if I can move that the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting to consider the exempt information as defined under paragraphs 3 and 5, part 1, Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. Do we all agree? Okay, so I'm going to close the public section of the meeting and we're going to pause briefly before we continue.